Okay, Daniel, I think we can probably get started. Maybe give another 30 seconds for people just joining, but looks like people are starting to pile in.
Okay, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everyone. This breakout session. Your host, you see us either live or in our high school graduation pictures here. I'm Daniel Laurin. I'm a VP of Client Solution at Ecologics, and working in my team is Craig Ward, solution architect for Ecologics. So let's get into it. You can go to the next slide, Craig. The cloud. I mean, it's so much everywhere that we don't realize it anymore. You know, you collect your air miles, you order from Amazon, you're listening to Spotify, you do a little bit of work and take email and stuff. Every day we go into the cloud. I would say this is, everybody knows that now. It's not something that we can avoid. We don't even realize we're using the cloud at one point. So if you had a chance to listen to some of the previous session, there was a deep dive with from some of the brains of the industry from Google. So they got a bit deep into the detail of what they can do. What we'd like to do is kind of maybe take a little step back instead of digging into too much deep into the cloud. So I'm assuming that you all have a good idea of what the cloud is at this point. But please let me amuse myself by giving you a quick definition anyway. So basically, the cloud is someone else's server doing your IT job for you. You know, that's kind of one of the simple way to see that. I think we all got to realize that. At the end of the day, this cloud needs to be still somewhere in a data center. If it's just not yours, but it's still sitting somewhere in the data center. So one of the questions we see our client, our end user asking themselves is, well, if it's not my infrastructure, why would I care about the infrastructure of the cloud itself? But basically, it is rather important because the performance of the task you're going to try to perform depends on the efficiency and the performance of the infrastructure that's behind you, even though it's not yours. So it's very important. The safety of your data also depends on what's running it and where is it kept and how is it treated. And also at the end of the day, the reliability of all that infrastructure is important because when you want to use your application, you want the application to be there, up and available. It depends on it. So even though it's not your infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure itself is very important because you need it to get the job done. The other question we also get is then, why do I need my own infrastructure now if I can do everything with cloud? Well, I guess this is a debate that's ongoing. As we see with the market trends of the cloud, there's kind of less reason to have your own infrastructure only and run your own data center, your own server, your own application, and develop your own application. There's less and less reason to do that as the trend is showing. But at a minimum, you're always going to need some minimum hardware because you need an interface. You know, you need to see data, input data, see the result of processing the data. So you always need a minimum of hardware to use as an interface. What another reason why it's you might still need some hardware of your own is because not all application that you run can be run on any cloud. There's a lot of compliances depending in which vertical industry you are, what type of data you're using. So this is sometimes some data can go in a cloud. Sometimes it's a bit more, it's a bit tougher. You may have also, one of the reality is times fly, but you might have vintage application that are complicated to put into the cloud. So you want to keep running them because it's easier while you transit to a new application to do the job. So that's another reason as well. There's always also a question of, there's this big question of a triggering point where when is too much server justify going to the cloud, and when not enough. You know, there's a trigger point of when is it worth going to cloud and when is it worth to bring it back home or keep it home. So those are all the points that basically bring us to what we see. The vast majority of reality is most end user are in a hybrid solution. You know, they're in a multi-cloud environment because of all those reasons, because of the in-house expertise, the in-house policies, and as it was mentioned in the previous presentation, the cloud is still, although it's everywhere, it's still in these early stages. So there's still a lot of unknown of where is the cloud going, and a lot of players are doing a lot of fast growth. So which one is going to go to where you need to the first one? So there's still a lot of moving pieces. So yeah, so that brings us to, I guess, the heart of our little breakout session. What is multi-cloud? Well, just like that, you know, thinking about it out of my head, it is the use of multiple cloud computing and storage services in a single heterogeneous architecture. Basically said, did I get right? Did I get this right?
That was perfect. Yeah, perfect.
I stole that definition from Craig, so he's the brain behind all of that. But simply said, we're not at a stage where one size of cloud fits all. So, you know, it's still, and it's changing every day. So, you know, you do not buy a new pair of shoes on Spotify, and you have the Microsoft suite, which is pretty popular as a back office, but then you have Google, which is machine learning, very strong machine learning wise. And we can give you 100 of examples of very specific cloud that are very good at what they do. So why do business use multi-cloud? Yeah, part of the answer is there's so many things to do out there so that no one product is necessarily the best at doing all of it. So, and there's also more specifically compliance reason. Different verticals of industry have different rules. The financial system, you know, you got to keep track of your record for tax purposes and regulation. And if you're in the healthcare, then the data of the patient is highly confidential. If you're in the gaming industry, some states allow it, some don't, some countries do. So each vertical has their regulation. And if you guys are probably familiar with some of them, like the PCI, ISO, HIPAA. So one of the reasons to go on the cloud is the burden of respecting those certification and keeping them up to date is on the cloud provider. So you don't have to go through the motion of getting those certification and keeping that up to date. So most of the work is pushed down to the cloud players. The data sovereignty comes also depending on which data you're using. Even in a specific company or enterprise, you're going to have different type of data. Some of it you can put it anywhere on the planet, but some of it, there's a data sovereignty that's going to come into play, and some of your high executive might be ticklish about putting some of the data somewhere else than in your own state or country. And for other reasons, there's also local laws that differ from one place to the other. So you got to cope with all of that. And at the end of the day, business moving fast as well is there's a scalability and a global reach that the cloud provides you, and you can pay more as you use, because the cloud is there to grow with you without you having to predict what are you going to do in 5 or 10 years. So you can have a bit more of a short-term planning, which is more logic in the speed of business today. The cloud gives you an opportunity to reach and scale. And you don't have to worry about the tech refresh as well. You know that your cloud providers are going to do that. So those are some of the business driver why you go in cloud. And I'll turn this to you, Craig, and if you want to keep going,
Sure.
the business driver themselves.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm finding in our line of work is that there's often many types of drivers pushing people to multi-cloud. Sometimes it's compliance, as you mentioned, CapEx, OpEx, scalability. Sometimes it's regional. You know, sometimes there's a cloud provider not available where you need access. So that'll drive people to be hybrid or multi-cloud. You know, there's product accessibility reasons. If you want fast access to your website or your streaming content, you're going to use CDNs, and that's going to be all over the world. That's a great example. Or disaster recovery. You know, having your data in 2 different clouds and multiple clouds will, you know, potentially help you avoid a single cloud failure, which, you know, we haven't yet seen on a large scale. But, you know, disaster planning is all about imagining the worst case scenario, not necessarily what just happens. You know, the biggest concern that I see from customers is that, you know, hybrid cloud is great, but how do we access it? How do we make sure we can always do it, you know, in a responsible fashion in terms of networking? Basically, you know, using public interface to clouds, you know, you're going over public internet, there's going to be latency, potentially security issues, you know, and if your enterprise is huddling your internet traffic out through a single point, you know, that may also add latency or security concerns. We're finding that with Google and other cloud providers, you know, offering direct connect, it allows you to kind of build the cloud into your own, you know, private network. You can access your VPCs over private connection and just kind of scale out even your internal development or your internal resources into the cloud without really having to worry about internet traffic. You know, everybody still wants to listen to Spotify when they can. You don't want your data uploads being affected by people's listening to music or whatever the case may be. So these back-end, you know, private connections to cloud is giving people a lot more flexibility and allowing companies to rely on multi-cloud or build into multi-cloud in a much more seamless fashion. There's different ways of accessing the cloud. You know, everybody knows, you know, the common one, direct access over internet. People are probably familiar with Megaport and other types of providers like that. You know, other options are going to data centers where these connectivities lie within those data centers. So you're not necessarily traversing data centers or regions to access these on-ramps. You go and find a place where the ecosystem is right there. Our ecosystem is very, very robust in that sense. You know, we have carriers, network providers, internet exchanges, of course, the hyperscale cloud providers. You know, one of the things that will be advantageous is to make sure that as you grow and scale, your on-ramp to the clouds can grow and scale as well. You know, we're happy to hear some questions if you have any questions or comments or experiences that you'd like to talk about. You know, Daniel, how would you project costs or look forward to spending in the cloud? Do you have any customer stories about how people decided to go into the cloud and what they did in order to plan for that?
Well, not all enterprise are at the same stage in their own business development, and they're not all at the same stage either in their moving into cloud. Everybody's touching cloud, but because not everybody's at the same spot, it's the planning for most of the client we talk to. The long-term planning is tough. Nowadays, long-term planning is what do we do till the end of the year? That's kind of becoming long-term planning. So
Yeah,
for that reason, what our client want is flexibility, because they say, let's go on a path, let's start something, but let's not corner ourselves too much, give ourselves a chance to turn left or right or readjust. So this is why we've seen a lot of interest in our ecosystem, because it's kind of, okay, not exactly sure what I'll need in 2 years, but if I've got a strong ecosystem, because the cloud, at the end of the day, someone is running a server somewhere, but the key is, how do you get to it? How do you get the data to it? How do you get the data back from it? So the networking piece is more and more and more critical. So,
and that ties into a question from a user here. He's asking, why are there still high transportation costs to the cloud when you can connect with it on the edge, such as Ecologics or another DC? That's a great question. As with anything, costs decline over time, and we're starting to see that with some of the robust and interesting new connection methods coming out of the cloud. All the clouds offer direct cross connect, essentially, fiber uplink to their NNI. But now we're also starting to see hosted connections or virtual connections with these cloud providers using data centers like Ecologic as an on-ramp. And these types of connections can really, optimize your cost, because you're only paying for what you need, not only in the cloud, but also when you're uplink to the cloud to your virtual connectivity. So we expect to see those costs continue to drop as time goes forward. Okay. Another question here, and we only have another couple of minutes. We'll try to get to all of them. Some countries have some restrictions to transfer data to different country. How is this challenge met? Well, that's a great question. Some countries, and I think of Germany in particular, they have some data localization laws that require accounts created in Germany, if I recall correctly, to stay in Germany, and all those data to stay there. And while cloud providers are very flexible with that, it's still up to the owner of the data to know what they can do with that data. I'm going to rush through this because we only have one more minute, but clouds can help you manage your data in a legally and secure way, but it's always up to the end user and the owner of the data to make sure that they're compliant with local laws and data requirements.
And I'll end to that, Craig, this is why more and more of our client want flexibility, so they can cope with an unseen situation like that. They didn't realize the data, but they have a way to, okay, we'll use another cloud provider, or you use another solution. So flexibility in accessing and networking is becoming a big key. Absolutely.
So we're right at the edge of our time. We really thank you for being here. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. If you have any questions, please reach out. We're more than willing to continue this discussion offline. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions and the time with the other speakers.
Thank you all.